Hello, my name is Lisa Morales-Hellebo, and I'm here to talk to you about the digitization of supply chains and the paradigm shift to localization, on-demand, and circularity. I've spent the last 20 years of my career focused on mass customization, personalization, and on-demand micro-manufacturing, after being fortunate enough to be on the team that pioneered this space for a P&G and Redpoint Ventures-backed startup called Reflect.com. We created on-demand cosmetics, skincare, hair care, and fine fragrance in Silicon Valley way back in 1999. Customization, personalization, and on-demand have been the focus of my career ever since. The world we've become accustomed to would not exist without supply chains. 2020 has been the year that everyone realized supply chains are like oxygen. You only notice them when they're not there. How do we define supply chains? Well, the textbook definition is something like this: a network of connected and interdependent organizations mutually and cooperatively working together to control, manage, and improve the flow of materials and information from suppliers to end users. Or you may just think supply chains move boxes from point A to point B. Well, today's definition of supply chains is now everything is connected to everything else due to digitization, IoT, and cyber-physical systems. This represents the single largest operating system to ever exist. At a high level, the business of supply chain can be subdivided into the following categories: management, or supply chain network strategy, design, and execution; logistics, or the raw materials, manufacturing, storage, transportation, and movement of physical goods from one place to another; or finance, ensuring that producers and other supply chain participants and intermediaries get paid for the value they create and deliver to consumers. What are the key challenges confronting our supply chains? Growth of the world's population. According to Our World in Data, there has been staggering population acceleration since just the turn of the century. This population growth is straining our old systems exponentially. We are at a point in time now called the Fourth Industrial Revolution. Industry 1.0's hallmarks were mechanization, steam power, and the weaving loom. Industry 2.0 was the advent of mass production, assembly lines, and electricity. Industry 3.0 brought automation, computers, and electronics, which brings us to today. Industry 4.0, which brings digitization of supply chains via cyber-physical systems, Internet of Things, and distributed networks. Our existing supply chains have created instability in our natural environment, which the world's top scientists refer to as climate change. We all have borne witness to the increasing natural disasters, from Australia burning, the wildfires across the United States, increasing severe weather destruction, rising ocean levels, and of course, the pandemic. Whether it is politics or planetary instability due to climate change, we've seen increasing trade disputes, taxes, tariffs, and severe disruptions, like what's happening at the Suez Canal. Lastly, we can all attest to changes in consumer behavior. Our first world expectations to have anything we want at our fingertips and delivered within 2 days or as little as 2 hours if you're in a major city is impacting the rest of the world's population. The funny thing about supply chains is that they force us to acknowledge our connectivity to its every node, from the farmers growing materials to the mills and manufacturers producing finished goods, to our outsourcing of jobs that we deem less desirable, to our finite ocean and air freight yielding increasing competition and price increases for allocation. Now is the time to refashion our supply chains. Supply chains are undergoing a paradigm shift. That shift is from globalization to localization. Our global supply chains are no longer tenable for people, planet, or profits. The confluence of issues with our current global supply chains have driven many countries to seek out local production. How do we define localization? Well, my definition of localization consists of demand chains and circular infrastructure. One without the other is insufficient to not only produce locally, but to increase profits and drastically reduce our planetary impact. Supply chains produce, ship, then sell, while demand chains sell, produce, then ship, locally, last mile. You may be wondering why I'm showing you a starfish and a spider. The book, The Starfish and the Spider, lays out the strengths and weaknesses of organizational structures, which can also be applied to supply chain systems. In simplest terms, if you cut off a spider's head, the spider dies. If you cut off a starfish's leg, it simply grows a new starfish. Centralized systems are spiders, top-down and linear. If you cut off the spider's head, the spider dies. Decentralized systems are self-propagating and scale rapidly, but they lack authentication. These are also spiders with weak nodes. Distributed collaborative systems like blockchain, crypto, or REFASHIOND OS are starfish, clones of every node for agility, resiliency, and authentication across the system. If one node has a disruption like a flood or tornado, the data can be sent to the closest replica node for production, eliminating downtime and delays. We've spoken about system structures. Now let's dive into linear and circular economies. The traditional linear economy has a take, make, dispose model of production. The circular economy, also referred to as circularity, is an economic system aimed at eliminating waste and the continual use of resources. Existing supply chains are, for the most part, linear. They create value, sell, then destroy value before sending to landfill or incineration. Circularity creates a closed-loop system where all waste can be repurposed as raw materials for new products over and over again. Circularity leverages the same assets via repair, reuse, refurbishment, remanufacturing, recycling, and regeneration as remonetization opportunities. Let's explore some examples of circular companies. Evernew uses post-consumer waste clothing, aka finished goods, that we throw out or donate as the raw material for their regenerative textile process. This proprietary process allows them to break the fibers down to a pulp, realign the molecules into thread, and spin into new textiles up to 4 times before breaking down to sugars. We are literally sitting on generations worth of raw materials that people are sending to landfill or are sitting in their closets. Why are we clinging to the old paradigm of growing new fibers? Loop has productized reusable packaging and the reverse logistics process required to ship refillable containers to consumers filled with their favorite household branded products. The shopper requests a free pickup. When they're empty, Loop cleans, refills the product, and then redelivers them back to the consumer. Supply chains like Loop are the future. For Days is productizing the reverse logistics and consumer experience for returning used clothing at the end of its life, or its use to you. This process is generally onerous for big brands, so For Days has made it an easy service that rewards the shopper with credits to purchase new goods from any brand using their service. The resale market grew 25 times faster than the overall retail market last year, with an estimated 64 million people buying secondhand. Leprix has created the only authenticated wholesale supply chain platform for luxury resale. By focusing on the largest existing consignment businesses around the world, they have more inventory than any other player in this space, and nearly all the other resellers are now buying from their inventory. This saves resellers time, money, and massively expands their reach for quality inventory. I'd like to do a deep dive on fashion, specifically my company, REFASHIOND OS, the fashion demand chain. Let's start by reviewing why the fashion industry needs to be refashioned. For the last 50 years, we've seen brands compete in the race to the bottom, constantly seeking lower landed cost of goods sold. The industry left U.S. production for China and other markets seeking cheaper labor. To achieve the cheaper landed cost of goods sold, they needed to order in volume, which leads to heavy discounting, permanent sales, and dead inventory or dead stock. According to the Business of Fashion, dead inventory is costing the U.S. retail industry $50 billion a year. This is product that had raw materials grown, processed, milled, dyed, or printed, shipped to manufacturing, converted to finished goods, then distributed to retailers around the globe. At retail, this product is marked down to 90% off, and still nobody wants it. Then the brand ships this dead stock off the floor to make room for new inventory and warehouse it prior to shipment to landfill or incineration. Global fashion supply chains have also been killing our planet via carbon, water, and chemical pollution, not to mention inhuman labor practices. 73% of our textile waste is landfilled or incinerated. Other countries are leading the way to deal with textile waste at the root and have executed legislation to make the producers of textile waste accountable for their end-of-life repurposing via both fines and incentives. Considering that the average t-shirt travels 10,000 miles from soil to store and uses the same amount of water that the average human consumes over 3 years to produce, we must find ways to deploy circular systems, not only for the planet, but to yield a higher return on these assets. How do we deliver what brands and shoppers actually want? Brands want to shift from making something and hope it sells to sell it at full price, then make it. Shoppers want to stop wasting time searching for what fits their body and style. They want what they want, how they want it, made to fit them. REFASHIOND OS's solution automates on-demand manufacturing for the $2.7 trillion fashion industry via the first network of microfactories connected via shared demand chain tech stack, good for people, planet, and profits. Our global fashion supply chains are broken. They start with design and then source whatever it takes to produce each design from the corners of our planet. As we've covered, this is not only creating a massive environmental impact with opacity, high risk, and markdowns, but is still forcing brands to predict the future with long lead times. If you ask the industry what they want, a better crystal ball to forecast inventory. What they need is a better supply chain. Local fashion demand chains are the solution, because to be truly sustainable, brands need to invest in infrastructure and vendors in their largest consumer markets. Demand chains start with constraints, which we refer to as our sustainability toolkit, then design. To better understand what we mean by constraints, we asked brands, what items do you produce that every Americans have in their closets? T-shirts, hoodies, athleisure. Great. What textiles are those made from? Cotton, polyblends, lycra. As simple as that, those are an example set of constraints. We produce after an item is purchased, offer a range of sustainable textiles, allow brands to learn from startups that selling D2C at full retail price and higher margin is just a better model, target less than a 2-day turnaround to drop ship, have integrated blockchain provenance and data, and all of the above allows us to forecast raw materials instead of finished goods. The ROS fashion demand chain consists of both on-demand microfactories and a shared tech stack across the network so we can accelerate adoption and job creation. Rebuilding value chains here in the U.S. will create jobs from blue-collar textile sorting, disassembly, and processing to textile regeneration like Evernew, Kintra, or on and on. Our U.S. mills increase their volume, which lowers costs for all, and will allow U.S. factories to stop competing against overseas production's old paradigm because they will leverage the latest hardware and software with a distributed collaborative model, which means they're not competing against one another for work. ROS is shifting the focus to profits. A $100 retail price item produced overseas has around 33% in markdowns on average due to this volume production. The same item produced on demand in the US has higher COGS and labor, but it yields a baseline of 13% higher profit margin. That 13% higher profit does not account for the additional costs of global staff, global logistics, customs and tariffs, compliance opacity, long lead times, and advertising and marketing costs to move volume production produced overseas. The on-demand model has additional upside of local job creation, economic stimulation, transparency, agility, and more. REFASHIOND OS makes it easy for brands to adopt the future of on-demand without having to manage the infrastructure development, deployment, and ongoing tech innovation management, while yielding higher profit margins. The new profit model moves brands from landed cost of goods sold to bottom line profit. What are the key innovations enabling the future of fashion demand chains? The next evolution in AI, optimal dynamics. So existing AI leverages massive data sets with finite outcomes, seemingly to make real-time decisions, choosing the best output. Optimal dynamics leverages sequential decision analytics to make real-time decisions across massive, constantly changing, unpredictable data sets. Computer vision, AI, and machine learning is democratizing the creative economy. Sabitude allows any person to generate fashion designs using AI and computer vision by extracting key elements from simple mood boards or images and outputting digital vector file flats, which can be instantly translated to patterns. Supply Compass has an all-in-one sourcing, factory selection, and management platform with a simple and intuitive interface. The complexity of supply chains is being simplified as we digitize, enabling increasing digital node discovery, but only if factories are online. Kintra has created a farm-to-fiber approach for synthetics, using 100% bio-based sources and creating materials that are 100% compostable, leaving no microfiber pollution. Chainlink is blockchain trade finance built for ESG, with provenance on an immutable ledger. Fabric offers on-demand fulfillment of finished goods as a service. Micro-warehousing will shift from finished goods to raw materials over the next few years. Shimmy has gamified reskilling and upskilling. This game-changing tech has been teaching women in Bangladesh with a 4th grade education who are actually afraid to even touch computers because they believe they're worth more than their own life. Within a few hours, these women who can't read or write use audio and touchscreen to play the game of learning how to create digital patterns for fashion. Imagine what we can do with this tech to create jobs here in the US. Allwork is a total on-demand staffing and payments platform. They help companies more efficiently manage and pay every type of on-demand staff or freelancers they need for their business. Customization, personalization, and on-demand are now part of the consumer experience. The lines are blurring between supply chain and your consumer. And lastly, what I like to call future commerce, brand new channels we haven't even begun to consider, like this mobile shop that you can summon on your phone like you summon an Uber, outfitted with clothing at your size and your price point just for you. We are just seeing the tip of the supply chain digitization iceberg. So I will leave you with a question. How are you preparing for this paradigm shift? Thank you.